Hello, everybody, and welcome to the February 2025 edition of the Virtual Planetarium with Pete Lawrence and myself, Paul Abel. And as ever, we will start with the inner solar system and work our way outwards. And Mercury, well, it's too close to the sun in the morning sky to be seen properly at the start of February. It reaches superior conjunction on the 9th. So after this date, it slowly starts to become into the evening sky. But it's going to be quite a tricky object to see, I think.
Yeah, quite low down, isn't it? And it's worth mentioning that Mercury and Saturn will be 1.5 degrees apart on the 25th of February, but it's going to be tricky to see.
It is. On the other hand, the planet Venus continues to dominate our evening skies. Really does look quite beautiful, sparkling with a brilliant jewel. And you really don't need any chance to find it. It is one of the brightest objects in the night sky. At the start of February, it is possible to see it against a totally black sky. It's shining at magnitude minus 4.5. But as we move on later into the month, that will change.
An interesting thing to do, actually, if you do get an opportunity to see it in a dark sky without the moon around, if you've got a really dark area, is to set something up where you've only got the light of Venus coming in. So it could be like a cardboard box pointed with its open end at Venus, and then put a white sheet on the back of the box, and then put something at the front of the box which is a shadow casting object, and see if you can photograph the shadow cast by that object onto the screen in the back of the box. It can be done. Venus casts or creates a shadow. It's very sharp because Venus is effectively a point source of light. I've photographed it myself. I've seen it myself visually as well under very dark conditions. So that's something to look out for. A little unusual.
It is. I've never seen it personally. I've seen your pictures of it, but it certainly would be one to try. It's very interesting. The best time to look at Venus, as we said in our previous Virtual Planetarium podcast, is when it's against a twilight sky.
Yeah.
That's the best time to point a telescope at it. The phase is now less than 50%, so it will look as a lovely crescent. And this is actually the most beautiful part of Venus in its orbit, I think, is when you've got this crescent stage.
Without doubt, yes.
No other planet in the solar system has this large crescent stage that we can see and take advantage of.
Well, by the end of the month, Venus will appear 48 arc seconds across. That's about the same size as Jupiter when it's close to opposition. And as a slender crescent, it's about 14% lit. And that's really beautiful. It's just such a delicate thing to look for. And
it is.
And dare we say, I always bring this up, and no one's ever observed it yet, the ashen light.
I knew you couldn't resist. I just knew it. Why? Right. Okay, so we have this debate every single Venus elongation. So the ashen light is this faint glow recorded on the night side of Venus by a lot of reputable observers, it has to be said. And Pete's objection to it is that it has not been photographed. I personally don't have any stake in the game because I've never seen it. But I will say that the results from the Parker Solar Probe, NASA's probe that flew past Venus a couple of years ago, and imaged a lot of detail on the night side in infrared wavelengths that the human eye could pick up through the clouds, was quite tantalizing. So I don't think we can just write off the ashen light phenomena just yet.
I won't write it off if I see a photograph of it.
Well, go and take one then. I mean,
I've tried.
Well,
that's
try
the problem.
Harder. You have to get out there and do it.
Try so hard that you make it up.
No, that is not what I was saying at all, and you know it. But it is a problem. A lot of people don't image Venus when it's in the bright crescent stage, or didn't traditionally image Venus when it's in the crescent stage. It's quite low down.
There were a lot of observations of it, and then when cameras appeared on the scene and people said, well, if you see it, let us know, we'll take a picture. A lot of the observations dwindled off.
Well, yes and no. There were still times when the ashen light was reported and imaging was available. But for whatever reason, the two didn't marry up. But we have got more people imaging So we have now got more people trying to image the night side of Venus. So I think now we do have a better chance of, if somebody sees it visually, someone else recording it at the same time in digitally, because a number of observers like yourself and some of the others in the BAA Mercury and Venus section are trying to capture the night side of Venus in infrared to look for active volcanoes. So I think the night side is being more surveyed than it was, and remains to be seen whether an Ashen Light observation will be presented.
It's good to have a bit of a mystery in these days when everybody knows everything about anything. So it's lovely to actually have it there, but I still remain to be convinced with it. I'm quite happy to admit I'm wrong and it does exist if it appears, which is the correct way in science. But I need to actually see it, and I have tried many times to pick it up.
I can vouch this. You are very trying. So it's. But like you, I've tried dozens of times with dozens of different telescopes, and I've never seen it. So, but perhaps if some people's eyes are more sensitive to infrared than UV, maybe that could be a mechanism. I honestly don't know. But like you, for me, I would need to see a drawing and independently some sort of image on the night side. Maybe the part of the surface was particularly hot at that time, or we had an image of it in integrated light and showing some sort of possible glow. That is, I would need to see that as well to be entirely convinced.
Okay, well, let's move out.
You brought this up. I wasn't going to bring this up. You brought it up.
I like to be controversial. Okay, well, let's move away from Venus, and we will head out towards Mars, which was at opposition last month. Still managing to get a really decent altitude of around 63 degrees when it's due south. You need to have good seeing to be able to pick out good detail on Mars. I mean, you can see it under all different conditions, and because it's a slightly reddish planet, it can stand a bit of poor seeing better than other worlds out there, because red light tends to have a longer wavelength, which can get through the seeing better. But because of its size, especially at the moment, you do need good stability, really. But that's good because at 63 degrees up, you are out of all the turbulence very low down.
Yeah.
So as long as you've got clear weather and no clouds around, it's surprising. You must have noticed this because you've observed many times, but if you're observing outside, you notice it especially with the sun, actually, when you're doing solar stuff. Any clouds about, the seeing around the clouds is horrendous.
Yeah, it's particularly if it's actually not when they drift over the object. It's when they get near to it.
Absolutely right.
And the seeing just drops off appallingly. As you say, Mars can withstand a bit of that, but if the jet streams over us, and if the stars are twinkling up above, right overhead, it's going to be tough to see anything. There are a lot of nice details on Mars. The Syrtis Major is a striking feature. The North Polar Cap, that's the part of Mars at the bottom. When you look at it in a normal mirror inverting telescope, it's still fairly prominent, and we're getting white clouds and mists and fogs appearing in Mars over Mars's various features. So there are lots of interesting things to see, but it does require a bit of good stability, and as increasingly as Mars moves away from us now, higher magnification.
It shifts quickly, doesn't it? It's a frustrating world. I mean, it was in opposition last month when it got to about almost 15 arc seconds across. By the end of this month, it will have dimmed noticeably and only appear 10 arc seconds across. So it does disappear very quickly. It
does. Never mind. Okay, on to the planet Jupiter. Still a magnificent object throughout February. It does feel like Jupiter's been around for a while now. It reaches nearly 60 degrees in altitude, currently located in the constellation of Taurus the Bull at magnitude minus 2.4 on the 1st of February. So it's still a good target.
Yeah, that gets to about 60 degrees altitude, actually, when it's due south, which is excellent. The next planet out is Saturn, and the observing window is closing on Saturn at the moment because it's getting lost in the deep evening twilight, which is a great pity, but it will reappear later on in the year once it goes behind the sun, and it will still be fairly edge on to us. There's some very exciting things to look out for when it does reappear at the end of the year. Uranus is not that far from Jupiter. It's in Aries, which is next door to Taurus, but being a little bit to the west of Jupiter, it's suffering a bit more in terms of losing altitude as true darkness falls. Neptune is quite close to Saturn, so Neptune is, being such a dim planet as well, the magnitude plus 7.9, it's not really viable after the first week of February.
Okay, well, we have some specials now to look out for this month. On the 1st of February, Venus, Saturn and Neptune are in the same evening twilight area of the sky. And this evening on the 1st, they're joined also by a 12% lit waxing crescent moon. Binoculars will be required to spot Neptune because it's well below optical visibility for the naked eye. But that's a nice little grouping.
It is. There's an old word that was used to describe groupings like this. It doesn't seem to be used that much anymore, but it used to be called a massing.
Really? There we are then. We've got a massing. A massing. I like that term.
Massing.
Yes, that's good. We should bring it back for this podcast and use it more often when it occurs. A massing.
Okay, well, on the 4th, Jupiter's largest moon, Ganymede, can be seen transiting the planet from 0151 UT until Jupiter sets at around 0404. And on the 5th, we have a cluster visible on the moon. It's not really a cluster. It's the clair obscure effect called the stars of Aristillus, which is caused when the lunar dawn light hits the mountain peaks inside the crater Aristillus. There's quite a lot of little peaks that just stick up and they become illuminated. They look like a tiny little cluster of stars, and that's visible about 22:45 UT on the evening of the 5th.
That's quite a lovely little thing to see, actually. I stumbled on it once quite by accident the first time I ever saw it. I thought, what on earth is that?
Yeah, it's good.
It is quite... and you don't need a large telescope, really, to see it either. So, yeah, it's quite nice. Sticking with clair obscure events, on the 7th, the jewel handle can be seen on the moon in the evening, in the period around midnight. And on the 8th, Jupiter's outermost moon, outermost Galilean moon, I should say, Callisto, appears just 3 arc seconds south of Jupiter's south pole at 1908 UT.
On the 9th, from the centre of the UK, mag minus 0.8 Mars lies approximately 5 arc minutes south of the moon's southern edge at 1850 UT. For those further north in the country, the separation will be even smaller. Now, that's not an occultation, obviously, but it still gives an opportunity to capture Mars really close to the moon's edge, which is can be made into quite a dramatic image if you have the skills to do that.
On the 10th, the evening planet Venus appears 30% illuminated through the eyepiece, and the planet's diameter is currently 36 arc seconds. Time to try to see if you can see the ashen light. That is my final word on the subject.
Okay. Well, on the 17th, Venus appears 25% illuminated through the eyepiece. An even better time to try and see the ashen light.
Okay, this is getting silly now. On the 24th, though, now this is an interesting event to do. Tricky Titan and Shadow transit starting in the daytime. So the transit of Titans occurs between 1228 and 1755 UT, and then its shadow follows on behind from 1345 to 1945 UT, but Saturn sets around 1850 UT. So you've got to kind of observe Saturn at around the right time to try and get all of those objects in one go.
Not the easiest, but this is such a rare event, it's worth giving it a go, really.
It is.
It's also worth noting on the 24th, by the way, if you've been following the position of Mars in the sky, that it will appear to reverse direction against the background stars on the 24th, reverting from westward to eastward movement. So it goes from retrograde to prograde motion.
Indeed. And that's just one of the things that was noticed by Tycho Brahe and was not really explainable in circular orbits, which Kepler was able to rectify with his laws of planetary motion.
Very interesting.
It is. 25th, this evening on the 25th of February, Ganymede's shadow transits Jupiter's disk between 1835 and 2112 UT. And then the second Galilean innermost moon, Europa, begins transiting and keeping pace with Ganymede's shadow at about the same time. Europa's shadow transits between 2100 and 2336. Then Io experiencing an occultation disappearance event around 2105. I should say that seeing a transit of Europa against Jupiter can be difficult if Europa appears against one of the bright zones.
Yes.
If it passes through one of the darker belts, then you can pick it up.
Yeah. Okay, well, on the 27th, Venus appears 15% illuminated through the eyepiece. I'm not going to say it, with an apparent diameter of 47 arc seconds.
And then on the 28th, the moon spotting opportunity this evening, less than 1% lit, waxing crescent, setting 50 minutes behind the sun. So that's going to be quite a challenge. But if you like spotting thin crescent moons, this is a good opportunity to do so.
Absolutely right. Okay, well, we'll crack on with the night sky then. And we've still got Orion the Hunter dominating the scene. Orion's a bit like Venus, actually, isn't he? Because he sits there over this period and you get used to him being there as the sky's dark and you think, oh, yeah, Orion again. And what shall I look at around Orion, etc. And then you sort of get this mental observing list in your head about what you're going to look for. And quite often you wander off somewhere else and forget about it and think, oh, I'll do it next time. And then as you get into March, he's gone.
Yeah, it goes very quickly. So we should take this time to really make the most of Orion. It's well placed. It's still in a dark sky, and we have it really for most of the month.
Yes, we do.
Very easily recognisable. Top left, we have on the eastern side the orange supergiant star Betelgeuse, and on the bottom right towards the west we have the brilliant white Rigel, and then we have the three belt stars in the middle. Do you remember their names?
Mintaka, Alnilam and Alnitak. That's from west to east.
Yes, very good. And just below these belt stars, we have the brilliant sword handle of Orion, the Orion Nebula. This is a fabulous sight in a telescope of any size. This is an interstellar nursery. This is where stars are being born. It's a vast hydrogen cloud, and billions of years ago, our own sun would have formed in a nebula not too unlike this one. So
Orion has three swords, you know.
Yeah, where are the other two?
No, he has three. He has three swords. He has the sword is the bit with the Orion Nebula in it.
Right.
That's what's described as the sword.
Okay.
The star Kappa Orionis, which is in the southeast corner, it's the dimmer one of the main body, is called Safe, which means sword. And then in the Orion Nebula itself, there are some structures there. One of them is called the sail, and a sharp-edged one is called...
the sword.
The sword.
It is. I have to say, when I first turned my 12-inch telescope to the Orion Nebula, it was a really, really transparent night and the moon was out of the way. After 10 minutes of looking at the Orion Nebula, it was astonishing at the amount of structure that was in there. And the faint stars, which I just had never seen. I mean, the Orion Nebula is a stunning sight in a 4-inch telescope. But if you spend some time looking at it through a large telescope, the amount of detail is really stunning. Not just the stars, but the darker. So you've got the fish mouth, which is a darker region. Yeah. The trapezium is really stunning against the nebulosity. It really is quite something.
And you've got M43, which is immediately adjacent to, well, that's where the fish's mouth, the dark lane near the bright bit. The bright bit's called the thrust, and then you've got the fish's mouth there. And then M43, which has got it always used to throw me, this one. The star in the middle of it is NU Orionis, which is a variable star. And I used to think, that's not new.
No, NU Uranus, yes.
So that was quite confusing, really. But M43 is a small comma-shaped nebula. And there are clusters above and below the Orion Nebula, and you've got other fainter regions of nebulosity. You've got NGC 1977, for example, which is the Running Man Nebula, which looks great in photographs, quite difficult to see visually. So there's loads and loads of stuff there.
And the belt stars themselves are part of a cluster as well, aren't they?
Yeah, Colander 70, which you can see quite a lot of stars there if you use binoculars to look at it.
Yeah.
Well, let's go from one extreme to the other then. Look below Orion, where you've got Lepus the hare, which is... I always describe this as looking like an infinity symbol with ears.
Right. Okay. Not seeing that, but okay. It's very creative. Well done. Have points on creativity. How does an infinity symbol... Why would an infinity symbol have ears?
Is that what you're taking from this?
Yeah. We'll have this discussion offline. It's fine.
Okay, well, there's a good challenge object in Lepus, if you want to go for it, which is M79, which is a globular cluster. It's magnitude 8.5, and it's very south, so it's quite a tricky one to pick up.
It is. In fact, if you're doing the Messier Marathon, this is one of the hardest ones to complete if Orion's still around. I've only seen it once, actually. It's actually a lovely object, but it is quite a long way south, and you can forget that it's there.
Okay, well, the region to the bottom right or southwest of Orion and right or west of Lepus is occupied by a meandering chain of faint stars that forms the northern regions of reaches of the constellation of Eridanus, the river. And this is a very long constellation that flows way down towards the southern pole, where it ends in a rather lovely star, actually, Achernar, which is really quite bright, but you can't see it from the UK, so you'll have to take our word for it or head further south. But if you go from Rigel towards the sort of start of the river there is a rather lovely and quite faint nebula, which is probably more for the astrophotographers amongst us, which is IC 2118, which is the Witch Head Nebula. Have you ever tried for that visually?
I haven't, because I think it'd just be too difficult. It's low down and there'd be light pollution. I have seen lovely images of it, but I think you would really need a dark sky and nothing on the horizon, really, to be able to pick it up. But I've never tried for it. There may be people who have seen it from towns or from out in the countryside with modest equipment. I don't know, but personally, I've never seen it.
Right, okay. Well, as we go later through into the night, Orion is really the standard bearer for the winter night sky. We start to head towards a more springtime constellations. We've got Leo the Lion and we've got Cancer the Crab beginning to appear. Cancer is a fairly faint constellation, looks like an inverted Y, and right at the very heart of that constellation is Messier 44, the Beehive cluster, which is a beautiful thing to look at, isn't it?
It is, but not in a telescope.
No.
The best views I've actually had from it are either in binoculars or my finder scope, actually, in the finder or binoculars. I've got an 80mm finder on my telescope, and that is by far the best view I've had of these open clusters, because you can fit them all into the same field, and it really is quite a pretty sight. Which
is what you need. In fact, if you have got a telescope and you want to look at a cluster, there is another one in Cancer the Crab called M67, which I think is really good. It's really quite a dense, packed cluster. It's much older and much more distant than M44, and it's far less visually impressive, I guess, but it's still a rather lovely thing to look out for. Right, lying below the inverted Y of Cancer the Crab is a sideways teardrop of stars, which marks the start of the enormous constellation of Hydra the water snake. This is the largest constellation in the entire night sky. There's very little to it, really, apart from the sideways teardrop of stars marking his head, and going down from that, south from that, and slightly to the east, you come to Alphard, which is the brightest star in Hydra, more or less on its own.
Yeah.
Alphard means the solitary one.
Yes, quite a not a very distinctive constellation.
Not really. Okay, well, we're starting to wander off into spring territory now, so we'll draw to an end in a moment. But it's worth just mentioning we've also got Leo the Lion, which is probably the most iconic constellation of the spring season appearing. That's to the east of Cancer the Crab. We've got the impressive sickle pattern, which looks like a backward question mark, with the bright star Regulus at its base. But that really is quite iconic, isn't it, Leo?
It is, and really I think of it as starting to mark the beginning of spring.
Yeah. Okay. And also galaxy territory. So we'll come on to that as we head into the next virtual planetaria. But for now, thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much to Paul for your input. And we'll, or you'll hear from us rather next time.
Thanks, Pete.